Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us. Maybe we can start by introducing yourselves and your firms, perhaps. Start with Niko.
Yeah, sounds awesome. Excited to be here. Thank you to for having us, and thank you, Brett, for moderating this panel. My name is Niko Bonatsos. I'm a partner at General Catalyst. At GC, our mission is to invest in positive and powerful change that endures. We're a multi-stage venture capital firm. We have offices in New York, San Francisco, London, and Boston. And I've been very obsessed with technical young founders who are building products for themselves. And it's great to be in Redwood City during the AI spring. So.
The AI spring, I love it. Hi, everybody. I'm Leigh Marie. I invest at Founders Fund. Prior to Founders Fund, I was one of the first engineers at Scale AI, and then a product manager there. So yeah, love to look at everything, every stage, dev tools, ML, and data. So excited to chat more.
Awesome. Yeah, and I guess I forgot that I'm Brett. I'm a managing partner at Initialized Capital. Also invest in a bunch of technical stuff. Okay, so maybe we can start with, what is your background in investing and dealing with AI, and was there ever what got you excited? Was there an aha moment that struck you like this is going to be crazy? Leigh Marie?
So I guess first exposure to machine learning in college, there's a brief period where I thought I was going to do math research, and so kind of ended up taking a lot of classes adjacent to that, and my first ML class, I was just, this is amazing. It's like a way to take all of these things that I love about math and sort of apply them more to the real world. And so kind of wanted to work at a startup where I get to work with machine learning engineers after school. Was fortunate enough to meet Alex, the CEO of Scale, during college, actually playing poker. And then sort of joined Scale right out of school. I primarily worked on the LiDAR annotation product there, so worked with a lot of self-driving car companies. Basically, the product was they send their LiDAR to us, their camera images, and then we return sort of ground truth data using a combination of humans and ML. And so yeah, being able to sort of work with people on the cutting edge of machine learning, learned a lot, and then now sort of use that knowledge investing in the next wave of ML startups. And then in terms of kind of what was my aha moment with the sort of the current generative AI hype. So I was meeting with one of my portfolio companies, and I consider this, it was an early stage team, like a few of the strongest engineers that I knew, and Copilot had just come out, so the automatic code generation product from GitHub, and they had all been using it, and I was just shocked. Like I thought, this was maybe something that helps beginners learn how to code. And yes, 3 of the strongest engineers that I knew were all using it and said that they were so much faster coding. And so I was like, wow, this is really here. This is new, and I think code generation is really just the start. So yeah, that's kind of my current aha moment.
Yeah, cool.
Code generation stuff is really interesting, right? I was reading that 50% of all code now on GitHub is done with the help of Gen AI, which is really awesome on Copilot. But for me, the aha moment was when my mom in Greece called me a few weeks ago, and she was deeply worried whether my brother, who is a trained urologist out of the UK, would have a job in the next year or 2. Because a lot of what he does is he is calling people and trying to diagnose from afar on the back of a bunch of the medical imaging exams that they've done, whether they need a surgery or not. So my mom was like, oh my God, I've been reading about this ChatGPT stuff, AI is everywhere. Is your brother going to be okay? So you help him find a job. So for me, this was like, okay, now I need to pay attention. And of course, at GC, we have a history of investing in the space in companies like Grammarly, Hive, and many others over the years before AI became cool.
I'm really curious, what did you tell your mom?
I tell my mom, look, it's going to be fine. His education was worth it, very well, worth it for him to be paid for. And, he might miss out on some diagnosis stuff, but he's a really good surgeon, so he will have more time to to make surgeries and make more money as a result. And she was very reassured.
That sounds like a theme. Okay, I guess, like we were kind of referring to, we've been talking about ML for years, and now I guess when we're on a panel talking about AI, we mean generative AI. And even that has, there's a breadth of things going on in that space. So I don't know, maybe Niko, how are you thinking about like what's interesting from an investment perspective these days? Is it something specific, everything under this banner, or like what's your?
Yeah. So when we think about AI, there are like a few different, like elements to consider. First, you have like the talent, like the founders. This is probably the most important element for early stage investors. The second one is the compute piece. This is probably an area where like young startups don't have an advantage, and like the much bigger, players like AWS and others, have a leg up. The third one is the algorithms. So far, certain teams like OpenAI, they've managed to produce proprietary algorithms, but the ethos, is moving towards a universe where a lot of these algorithms are going to be freely available, like open source software, or very easily, accessible as a result. And then the fourth element is proprietary access to data. So when we think about like, a GC investing in the space, we care a lot about the people first and foremost. Are they learning animals, ridiculously ambitious? They're innate in the space because they deeply care about the customers. And then do they have access to proprietary data flows? And as a result, we think that media, defense, and healthcare are like three industries where Gen AI and LLMs can really be transformed. You have very specific data sets. You have specialized talent that is working over there. A lot of the work is repetitive, and these new technologies can completely reinvent the existing ways that products get built.
I guess in that context, and thinking through, I think it's this standing debate in the investor community, like where does the value get captured and where the value capture layers, and I think that has an overlay of kind of the taxonomy you just laid out. So I don't know, like what are your thoughts on? Do you have concerns as investors on where startups can actually compete and create value? Leigh Marie?
Yeah, I think everyone, even some of the literal ML experts that I know are just constantly asking this question, like, well, should I be an ML infrastructure company, or should I verticalize and sort of get specific proprietary data and sort of go at it as a vertical application? I guess my kind of terrible answer is that I think there's a lot of value both places, but I do think, maybe echoing Niko's earlier point, you as a founder have a unique set of skills and sort of network and access to compute and data, and also each particular vertical has a different sort of dynamic, in that maybe some verticals the incumbents can very quickly integrate all of this new technology into their platforms, and then maybe some verticals are way more open. So I think it's like a combination of, what's your superpower as a founder? We're always very obsessed with that at Founders Fund, telling sort of your superpower, what you're better at than everybody else, and then applying it to either a problem in infrastructure or an application. But I just think there's endless opportunities in code generation, assistance, automation, like media, images, videos. I think we're at the start of all of this, and there's, so many amazing companies to be built.
Yeah, so what's going to be particularly exciting is going to be like the second generation companies in the space, because very similar to what has happened with other technologies in the past. For example, when automobiles were invented, it was pretty clear, quickly that people would want them. But it was really hard at the time to figure out, that Walmart, Costco would become really massive businesses, that would benefit from the invention of automobiles. So like stuff like that's going to happen with the current, crop of technologies that we've seen with AI. And if I were to be an enterprise founder in particular today, and I wouldn't be thinking, how is this going to affect me as I'm getting started with a company? Probably, I should be worried, that my lunch would be eaten in the next few years.
I guess it's kind of interesting because there is this near term, generative AI has allowed people to create like crazy, impressive demos. So navigating that as a founder, I feel like might be a little difficult, because you're thinking, there's the standard device of, think about markets later, just make people very, very happy, and then, build from that base. But with the leverage it brings, there might be a lot more, it might be easier to compete with everything, right? So like, I don't know, how would you think about that as an early stage founder getting started and, you know, moving beyond just building something exciting to like, where do I find a business? The idea is.
I mean, look, there's so many like vertical SaaS companies out there. Oh my God, you know, no offense to any of you who are vertical SaaS founders, but they're like literally hundreds that are making $100 million or more a year. And they're boring as hell. They're serving customers that very few people really know how to empathize with them. They truly understand the workflows and what the specific, you know, data sets are. We've learned that the vast majority of these companies have pretty awesome retention, you know, net revenue characteristics. So do I think, you know, that a number of them will be leapfrogged / disrupted by anybody new who's coming into that space, especially, you know, in healthcare, defense, and media? I think it's pretty likely. So that's where I would get started. So we need to find, as Leigh Marie said, founders who are deeply obsessed with the customer, they're learning animals, can recruit awesome AI talent and go for it.
Do you think there are, I mean, it's always sort of interesting, yeah, taking a step back, I mean, kind of go back to the basics of sort of strategy and company building. It's like there are very particular things in certain industries like healthcare or legal, or there's certain sort of data files that you can create or other types of moats. And so, you know, I think just having a founder explain that strategy and why they're going to be defensible and why they're able to disrupt incumbents in the space, or, you know, what's going to happen when you announce your funding round and then 20 other, you know, small companies copy you, like what's your defensibility? So, you know, any successful company, you can almost guarantee there's going to be fast followers. So is it the data, is it the algorithm, people, something else?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the theme is that it's a new tool, but it's the same sort of problems and playbook that startups have always faced. Okay, I guess one more kind of weird, wonky investor side question. Like, what's going to happen? What about fear of all of the foundational model companies taking over a lot of the innovation in the market? And you know, the idea that these foundational models they're still, you're building on top of them, and then they're a step function better and might eat into the application area that you've spent so much time on.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially if you're, you know, quite paranoid, as many good founders are, you're always thinking through this sort of question. I think, at least from the messaging of a lot of these companies and sort of how much they're sort of supporting the applications that build on top of them, it seems as if it's going to look more like sort of the cloud compute hyperscaler story versus like we're going to figure out which applications are great and then just go and spin off a completely unrelated team to do that. But yeah, I mean, if I were a founder, I'd be thinking about it, and I'd be thinking about, okay, you know, play the chess game. Why or why not would they do this? And you know, if there's me and 1,000 other startups building in this application and paying them all this money to use their models, like why would they do that? So yeah, just sort of game theory to think through.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So do you understand your customer better than anyone else? Do you truly understand what platform risk means when you're using somebody else's, you know, like a software distribution to get a leg up? Over time, you know, you need to control more and more your destiny. So it's very much of a game theory, as Leigh Marie said.
And I think we're already starting to see examples of companies using multiple model providers, like contributing to the open source ecosystem, using those providers, and then also companies that help you use things in open source. So, yeah, I think we're starting to kind of see that play out.
That's right. In general, you know, it's really hard to be all things for all people, as we've seen, you know, even with some of the massive incumbent tech companies today, because trust, you know, erodes with many of the customers, and that's how the next generation of disruptors, new founders, startups can come in.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, to the extent they don't just suddenly unleash full AGI, like it's the same dynamics as building on top of providers that we've dealt with in the industry for a while. Okay, I guess switching to like, you know, even if you're not building a AI company or a generative AI company, like what does this mean for just software companies at all. I think the first thing that I'm sort of struck by as a developer is the leverage point, and I'm starting to have a suspicion that teams might end up smaller, right? Like fewer people can write a lot more software. How do you think like staffing might play out in a world where everyone has access to robust generative AI code production?
Look, like again, you have like technical talent, you have product people, you have good market talent. So in this brave new universe, if I were not building AI first company today, what else would I be doing? Would it be crypto? I don't know. Would it be a different company build than how we would have done it before? Maybe. I think this new set of tools is helping individuals who are perhaps non-technical get started, because you can do plenty more damage sooner rather than later. What I like with a lot of these LLMs, you can test new ideas very quickly, understand what the consumer or customer demand is before you decide to, okay, we're going to go full on, recruit a technical team, go and build it. But I haven't seen yet, any technology that comes out that results in a lot less R&D spent, from many of the companies that we're investing in. And that's what, we as investors, board members want. We want the bulk of the capital we provide to our portfolio companies to mostly be spent on awesome technical talent. Oh,
I guess they want you to speak up, so I think.
Okay. My mic has a problem?
Yeah.
Oh no. Okay.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Leigh Marie, are you seeing anything different on the staffing side, or?
Yeah, it's been interesting. Obviously, if this technology makes people more productive, I think it's a question that we'll sort of have to debate, and I think it's one of the things that policymakers should have top of mind, that potentially as people get more and more productive, we just kind of think of staffing in a different way. But what's been also interesting is seeing, at least with the companies that I'm working with, an increase in different types of roles and different sorts of people getting hired. So I've never heard of a prompt engineer before, or a lot of these people that are supporting sort of the rollout of LLMs or building infrastructure in the company. So I think it's sort of a balance, but it's definitely a brave new world, and something that we're going to have to think about.
Have either of you been discussing, companies that aren't in the space directly, whether or not they need a strategy, if they should be participating? I guess, the first lens is kind of back to competition. If you're a company that's not using generative AI, is someone else going to be able to outcompete? Is this something you pay attention to or talk about?
Absolutely. Something that I've talked about with a lot of my companies, if you're not recording the data to sort of incorporate this technology into your product, you need to be, because there'll be some competitor that started. I've basically seen sort of new companies in almost every vertical that are saying, okay, we're like them, but we're going to incorporate LLMs faster. So at least make sure that you're setting yourself up to continue to be successful. So recording the data that you need and starting to hire or sort of shift strategy, especially if you feel like they're a big threat.
Do you think that's do you think just that plus LLMs integrated faster is a coherent strategy? Or,
I think in some verticals it's a little bit more compelling than others, especially if there's another angle, so a counter positioning angle or something, maybe the incumbent loses value if they incorporate LLMs. I think that's maybe a bit of a stronger strategy, or if the incumbents just really don't have the technical talent or know-how to do it, and there's a significant, let's say 10x better user experience of your product if you incorporate it, or some new workflow that you need, some new product build that you need. So I think in some cases it's a lot more convincing than other cases how scared you should be. But I do think most people should be thinking about it at least.
How about you, Niko? Is this a conversation that's coming up a lot with companies you're dealing with?
Oh my God, since Q4 2022, I don't think there's been a board meeting that I've attended where there's no what is our AI strategy section. So even if you try to be half asleep in board meetings or do email, this is the one that everybody wakes up just to see what the other people are thinking. So yeah, it's front and center, you know? What does this Brave New World mean for me? What does it mean for our competition? What does it mean for our product? And many of the customers now are actually, you know, like emailing, asking, you know? Also, many of the employees are emailing the founders and saying, what is our AI strategy? So everyone is looking for answers, so you can't ignore it.
Totally, I think it's reached ubiquity. Yeah, your parents, my parents in Alabama, using ChatGPT to like write eulogies, it's crazy. Like it's just, everybody is asking about it. I've seen it in wedding speeches, it's, yeah.
It's incredible. It can make each one of us like a stand-up comedian. I don't need an analyst now. Investment memos automatically can be written, you know, on their own. I went and had like a hip X-ray a few days ago, and you know, when you get the results back, it's like in Latin. You can barely understand, but then you put it on ChatGPT. Oh my God, you know, it's 80% as good. It's great. My wife has a small fund. Every time she calls her attorney, a lot of you founders would empathize. To seek for advice, $500. Now, any of her companies gets a term sheet. She adds it on ChatGPT, summarize the most important points, free. It's pretty good, right? These are recurring use cases. You can make money on them.
Only sometimes wrong, you know?
Sometimes wrong, yeah. But you know, we as humans hallucinate too, so, and we're the makers of these technologies, so inevitably, you know, some of it will be fake.
Yeah, I guess speaking of which, in these discussions, are there red flags or things you're worried about? You know, do you have any concerns about any of the companies you're working with leaning too fast into generative AI?
Yeah, so the concern is, you know, if you don't understand your customer, you don't own distribution, you don't have access to any proprietary data set, and you're just doing it, you know, for press or to please your investors, things are not going to work out. These are big concerns.
Okay, so just getting excited about generative AI and drifting away back to kind of the fundamental discussion we were having earlier. What about, is there any, I guess a lot of these models are hosted externally, and you know, have you had concerns about like how and where it gets used on proprietary data in the companies you're working with?
If anyone is building an enterprise security company to solve that particular issue, please reach out to all three of us. This is a great, you know, area that awesome, you know, innovation is getting started. Because each one of us, we're really curious and we're asking, you know, ChatGPT for whatever comes to mind. It could be something personal. It could be, you know, sharing some customer data that we're not supposed to, and that stuff is not supposed to happen, you know, sometimes.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think there's tons of questions around data privacy. Where's the model hosted? Like, you know, what data should you even be like exposing to these models? Like, how good is the security of whatever model you're using? And so, yeah, I agree. It's a space that's just starting to get talked about, and I imagine will continue to be talked about more and more.
Yes, and now we're talking about, like, you know, do you work for the government? You can't use TikTok. For a short period of time, it's going to be, do you work for like a specific company or a specific department of a specific company? You can't use any of this, you know, open source, public LLMs.
Do you think that's going to relate to how it plays out with the, you know, the closed source versus open source generative AI foundational model landscape?
It will, right? And it's really smart on the side of some of the larger providers to let you actually use their technology essentially on-prem, you know? So it will have to play out like that.
Do you think that open source models will be as good as closed source ones?
Again, these are the two different paradigms, right? For certain use cases, they could be good. For other use cases, sorry, you know, I can't touch them because I don't want anyone else to see my data, and my customers wouldn't want anyone else, you know, to see their data.
Yeah, I mean, I think each company, when they're using a model, has very different requirements around accuracy, latency, cost, you know, so it just kind of depends on, sometimes open source model is the best, and sometimes it's a closed source model. And so, yeah, kind of pick that way.
Yeah, I don't know. We want to wait. Yeah. I guess, I mean, all right, so then the other sort of ethical backdrop question, like, should we be afraid of AI destroying humanity? Like, where, you know, is this something that comes up, something we think about, like, where do we place, you know, higher level sort of AGI fears?
We're humans, right? And we're, in that sense, you know, tool makers. Since the very beginning of our history, we've been inventing new technologies. Every new technology has like good and bad uses. At GC, we invest in responsible innovation. That's like one of the core tenets we use when we're making investments. So AI can be definitely scary for some people. Like my mom was genuinely worried, you know, when she was like, is your brother gonna be out of work in a few years when she called me? And I was like, whoa, you know, this is really annoying. But also like in K-12 education, like are a lot of the students now going to be using AI to do their homework much sooner so they can go and play Roblox afterwards? Yes, but even for our generation, you know, you could have said, do not use Google because you're not going to learn how to use research. Or in previous generations, you could have said, do not use a calculator because you need to learn how to, you know, do everything, you know, with your brain. So I think we have no option but embrace this brave new world and build responsibly.
Agree, and I mean, relating back to kind of another very similar wave that I experienced with self-driving cars. Everybody thought that that was going to kind of usher in just sort of insane change, no more driving, and now you know, we're seeing now the long tail of all of the things that come up when you try to roll something out, a new technology out that sort of fundamentally shifts a paradigm. And I mean, I think we'll see something similar with LLMs. I think it'll take a really long time for it to be incorporated into all parts of our life.
Cool. Okay, I think we're at time. Maybe we can do one more. Is there something that you either saw lately or are looking forward to seeing that you're like particularly excited about in this space?
I think it gave us the idea, right? Whoever is building an enterprise security company will give you credit, you know, to figure out with the data, you know, like trust issue. That's one that we're excited about.
I mean, I think sort of the topics that we've chatted about, especially sort of using LLMs to rethink parts of dev tools, assistance, automation across industries. I mean, I think that there's just so much opportunity, and so I'd be super excited to chat about all of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. This was really interesting talk.
Thank you both.